Hey there, I'm Tracy Rigdon, and this is the Contrast Project Lounge podcast. In this podcast, each episode is a journey through captivating interviews, engaging dialogues, and personal anecdotes that explore the depths of arts, culture, politics, and everything in between. My goal? To leave you inspired, informed, and entertained. Often random, but always relevant, always real, and practically nothing is off limits. So whether you're an art aficionado, a political junkie, or simply someone seeking a fresh perspective, this podcast is for you. Are you ready for this? Let's do it. Welcome back to the program, guys. I have joining me now the founder and CEO of Impactful Speakers, all the way from Australia, Cat Matson. Cat, how are you?
I'm fabulous, Tracy. Thank you. And yes, Impactful Presenters is my little gig. It's my little corner of the world.
You know, it's really interesting when I'm looking through some of your material online, your website, and so forth, and the videos that you produce. It really is something that a lot of people can use. As we spoke before, uh, you know, uh, being an effective communicator in so many different ways. Whether you're a presenter of some sort, or a keynote speaker, or a business person, or even a politician. Anyone that's has to speak to public speaking to people and be effective with it. They have to master that skill.
Yeah, and one of the things that I have realized over my time is we think that we only need to train ourselves or up our skills in speaking if we're going to be a public speaker or be a politician, only if we're going to make our money from that medium. But actually, it's pretty hard to make an impact or to influence or to be a part of meaningful conversations in any professional context or in any civic engagement if you can't speak powerfully. And the more I've spent time in this space, the more I realize until we can speak externally with confidence and impact, we actually also then have trouble understanding ourselves, the value that we bring to the world, because what we say out loud
That makes
into the
sense.
world is also what we say internally, right?
Right. Makes sense. What was your driving passion to go into this career, this intersection of communicating with people, and from the role of as you had mentioned before, being engaged civically, and now working as a coach to both business persons and other leaders to speak with authenticity, like you say. What was the that time in your career when you made the decision that this transformative power of effective communication was going to be part of your path?
Mm. It was an interesting intersection of its own, to be perfectly honest, Tracy. I was sitting in a role that I had had for 7 years. It was an extraordinarily awesome role. I had the title of Brisbane's Chief Digital Officer. In fact, we followed a couple of cities in the States to implement this very a signature role, if you like, that was designed to lead the digital transformation of the city's economy, so really big. And it was my first exposure to how the public sector really worked. And I was sitting at the end of my tenure in that role, wondering, what do I do next? I wanted to create something again that was mine, like it was my own business again, rather than just being reliant on corporate salaries or public service salary. And I was doing a program to learn how to create a membership model. I thought it was going to be somewhere in the business coaching realm because that's what I'd always done. That wasn't coming together. It wasn't feeling right. And I sat there and went, no, it's speaking. because people keep asking me, Kat, how do you speak so well? I've been speaking on stages for 25 years. So, people think it comes naturally to me, but actually I have learned and studied and worked and whatnot. And so that was kind of the brainchild. But then the more I sat into it, the more I realized actually this is key, because if you can't, particularly in the public sector, we have so many complex challenges that need to be solved in the world right now. And one of the key issues that we have is it's the same voices who are contributing to the same conversations, who are producing the same outcomes and not changing anything. And one of the ways that we will
Exactly.
solve those complex challenges is by more diverse voices in these conversations. But the reason we don't have diverse voices in these conversations is because they can't be heard. Not because, well, a part of it is because they look different, sound different, but a big part of it is because they're not effective in their verbal communication. So those kind of things all converged, and I went, right, this is my new game. And it has been. Now, 3 years later, this is the game.
It's fascinating. It really is. And like you said, it really is. It's an art being able to speak in public, and it's also it's been a learning curve for me podcasting for the last 3.5 4 years. The first couple of seasons were really rough, my speaking presentation and
I
so forth,
bet.
but you get you keep doing it, repetitive and now it's oh gosh, 120 episodes, something like that. And it there used to be a lot of ums and ahs and a lot of dead space when talking, and sometimes I still catch myself rambling on. I'll get to rambling on a subject sometimes, and that can be just as bad, I suppose. But here we are.
Well, one of the reasons that we ramble is because we're trying to sort out our own thought processes on a topic or on an issue, and there is a time and a place for rambling. I often
Hmm.
have clients come to me and say, "Oh, but I'm not succinct enough. I keep rambling." I'm going, "It's okay to ramble. You need to unpack your thoughts." But you don't want to be rambling, for example, when you're trying to make a really powerful point, or when you've got the audience of a key stakeholder who can help you do something. You want to be able to hit them between the eyes with, your three key messages
Sure.
and a call to action. So and yes, speaking is a skill that we learn over time if we put the conscious effort into it. So one of the things that I often say is it's not a talent. I wasn't born able to do this. I was born with certain personality characteristics that make me more prone to be willing to learn. But it's a skill. It's a skill that we learn, and if you can learn to ride a bike, then you can learn to speak with confidence.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. In today's fast paced, digital world, the high tech world, case in point, you and I sitting here on two different sides of the planet talking. Um, how do you, yeah, how do you see the role of face to face communication evolving, especially in the context of leadership and community building?
Yeah, it's an awesome question. So I think the face to face piece is changing, obviously. We are face to face
Hmm.
right now. We've developed a relationship over time that started with kind of chat only, as in text chat, that then came
Hmm.
into a face to face environment, but via a screen. And we are a member of a couple of communities together. And so we build relationship in that context. We are unlikely to ever meet in real life, but that doesn't take away from our ability to influence each other, to work with each other, and to collaborate. So, in this world that we're now, I'm going to use the word growing up into because I've got two teenage sons, they experience the world completely differently to how we see this medium. I mean, my son is literally in the other room at the moment. He's badly sprained his ankle. He can't make it to school, even though he's 3 weeks away from his final ever Year 12 exams. And so he's online in the classroom with his school because they just said, oh, we'll just set up a Google Classroom for you so you can be part of it. That's normal. That's normal. What's not normal, and I think what we underestimate, is the importance of taking time to still get to know people. So having conversations. It's one of the reasons why I particularly like your podcast, Tracy, because you're having conversations that don't necessarily land at a certain point. It's just a conversation around humanity. And those conversations, they're really important when it comes to leadership and community building, because we're not robots. Even if we're in a certain environment for a certain reason, we have multiple elements to us. So I think the face-to-face piece will change. We will do more and more and more of this, and our world, that global village that I was taught at school, will become smaller and smaller and smaller.
Mm-hmm.
And as leaders and as community builders, we still need to invest in the relationship building that used to happen in a real world face-to-face same room environment, but we can do that in an online context.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I know that a lot of practically all of the business leaders and politicians that I've met and just seen online, they use this medium practically on a daily basis. And it's a couple years ago, more than a couple years ago, when Zoom meetings started taking hold all over the place. And now you've got platforms like this, like Riverside, and you've got StreamYard and all these other platforms that are vying to be the next big thing in this medium, coming up with more and more, features within the platform, whereas Zoom did things a different way. Now these platforms are doing things a lot different too. They're building from the ground up just for people that do record videos and do podcasts and that kind of thing. And so the features that we're getting in these new platforms are just fabulous.
I know they are. And I also think too, there's different platforms for different reasons. Like I do a lot of, as you know, I do my own podcast. I do a lot of Facebook Lives. Podcasting and live streaming feels a very one-directional conversation. I'm talking to my audience and they're not giving me a huge amount back, as distinct to this kind of a conversation. And so those different platforms enable us to do different things. It's really important, though, for us as community leaders to remember that even when we're not receiving direct feedback in the form of a conversation, our audience feels like they know us because they're getting this.
Yes.
They're getting a similar feel to a casual conversation. And it's not like broadcast media. It's not like CNN where it's all curated or edited. This is real. This is raw. And that's really important. I often am surprised when people will reach out to me and they'll just start a conversation as if I've been having a conversation with them for the last 3 weeks. And I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about. But it's because they've been in engagement with me.
Yeah. I find it fascinating. You were saying that I, have a lot of conversations with people, and that's really the one of the central key missions of my podcast is it's very random, and the guests are all real people. I mean, I've got politicians. This morning, I interviewed a sex therapist, and
Awesome.
we had a good conversation. Yeah, we did it. We got to laughing and joking and everything, and it was very, very candid, very real. The discussions on sexual health and sexual therapy and her practice, and it was fascinating. And then next week I'll be talking with a guy that's in a band.
And this is it. We're all human, right? We're all doing our bit in the world, and we're all expressing ourselves in different ways. We're all crafting professions or our ways of making money in different ways. But it is
Yeah.
all part of the human experience, and I think that's where the juice is.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. When it comes to in your coaching now, what are some of the most common communication pitfalls that you've observed in your coaching and leadership roles? And how can individuals avoid that?
Yeah. So the one that people come to me the most for, actually, there's two. One is nerves, and the second is rambling, and they kind of sit together really tightly because nerves create the ramble,
Mhm.
and the ramble creates the nerves. So, as I was talking before, we tend to ramble when we haven't lined up our thoughts yet, where we're thinking out loud, or when we're so excited and passionate about the topic as we see it from our perspective that we want to give
Mhm.
our listener all of the things all at once because it's all important to us, right? Like all of the detail, all of the tech,
Sure.
all of why it works is just so exciting to us. And so biggest the biggest antidote for that I teach is actually step into the shoes of your listener. What does your listener know, believe, think, or feel about this topic that you're about to launch into? And what do you want them to know, think, feel, or believe about this topic? And then when you identify those two gap, you kind of go, okay, well, they currently know this, and where I want them to be is this. Then you can identify, well, what is it that I need to say to them that will move them? And, I watched this in particular when working with politicians. Politicians, I wouldn't do it. I wouldn't do it in the world because I think the pressure on politicians is way too high. But politicians in our democracies often make the final decisions on big policy decisions, big programming. But they are also receiving a whole bunch of information, like literally by fire hose on a daily basis. So in working with
Yes.
politicians, what I learned was I couldn't actually take up all of their bandwidth in explaining everything about the program. Instead, I needed to say, this is who it's good for, this is why it's good for you, and this is how we'll execute it. And they go, oh, okay, great. We move on. So yeah, that's the rambling and stepping into the, where do you want to take your audience? And the other one is nerves, is we all of our stuff comes up when we are about to open our mouths because we think we're going to be judged. We think we're going to look stupid. We're afraid that we're going to prove ourselves to be stupid because a lot of the time we're actually assuming that we are and we hope nobody finds out. So our nerves really kick in, and my process for that is to have people understand that you don't need to be the expert. You just need to be an expert. You need to be bringing something to the conversation, not everything to the conversation.
Right. And talking about rambling and what you just said, not bringing everything to the conversation. What comes to mind, another form of rambling is the whole word salad thing.
Oh, yeah.
We had a former president. He was a
Don't know who you're talking
professional
about,
word
Tracy.
salad spewer. Huh?
Yeah. And it's funny because I spend a lot of time in the startup ecosystem, and the startup ecosystem and innovators and entrepreneurs, they're also quite prone to word salad. We tend to use word salad when we are trying to sound good when we know we don't have substance. It's like if I just say more, if I sound really confident, then I'm getting it all across, right? But also, and this has actually been a side, what's the opposite of benefit? A consequence of our increasing online environments where we are rewarded for more noise, for more presence. There's been a whole generation of jargon and word salad and
Sure.
posturing and positioning that doesn't come from substance. It comes from let me be an influencer, let me get more TikTok views, let me blah blah blah. So yeah, word salad's a spectacular way to ramble and to not make your point.
It's hard enough to listen to. It's even worse when you get the transcript and read it.
Yeah. And Yes. And when you read
Oh
those
my
transcripts and
gosh.
you go, what? Yeah.
I didn't know. But, like you were saying, again, going back to the technology portion of it, it's transformed the way
Mm.
we communicate. I mean, it's just made such an impact. And the way journalists do their news, and, everybody's on social media, even the journalists, have their own social media accounts. And there's still a lot of good journalists that tweet quite a bit. I follow several of them myself, and there is some really good content there. Uh, how can individuals and businesses strike a balance, between the
Mm.
technology for communication and maintaining that personal touch?
Yeah, I love this question because I am confronted on a daily basis with, here, just use this latest AI tool to produce all your content for you. But one of my biggest things is being authentic. And it's not to say that AI
Hmm.
can't help, but when you're leaning on it, or when you're leaning on any form of technology to represent you, then you're no longer connecting with heart. You're no longer connecting with authenticity.
Hmm.
In fact, particularly if you're speaking or if you're tweeting or Facebooking or whatever with AI, by definition, you're using an algorithm. You're using an assimilation of the
Sure.
white person's internet in your expression. So how can we use it?
Right.
I think for me, I use that kind of technology as a thought prompter. It helps me clarify things, and then I'll go back and, um, put my own voice in there. The other thing, and this has quite literally just downloaded into my head as an intuitive flash. The other way to use the technology as a business owner is to choose really wisely which platforms you play with and which platforms you ignore. Because if you're paying attention to all of them, it actually becomes both really overwhelming, but also it dulls your voice because you feel like you have to constantly be compromising yourself on all of these different places. Whereas if you just sit and go, no, I just need to connect with my people in my way, in a way that feels good to me, that's enough. I don't need to be seen on the entire world stage. I just need to be seen by my people.
Hmm. Hmm. The AI is fascinating world to me. But not only like the Chat GPTs and those, but also the generative AI, the people that are coming up
Yeah.
with digital art. There's a friend of mine lives up in New Hampshire now. He just produced a book and he does a quarterly magazine, and all of the artwork in the book, it's a fascinating book. It's about a an African king who happens to be a time traveler. It's
Awesome.
Afrocentric fiction is what he calls it. And
Nice. Yep.
it's fascinating, but the artwork in there too is fascinating. And I know he uses a lot of the others. He's come up with he's had to teach the responses, by repetitive, prompts that keep to the subject, and he's had to teach the the chatbot, the Chat
Mm.
GPT. He's had to teach it to uh, not only use the algorithm within the story that he's working on, but he's had to teach it to come up with African American figures and language
Yeah,
that is
right.
used in the African American community, because it does, if you don't specifically give it the right prompts, it really is going to come out sounding white bread.
Totally. Totally. And the fact that he's been able to do that is an art and a skill in itself. I watch some
Hmm.
people create amazing prompts. In fact, there's a growing market for people just selling prompts. um,
I know, I
because it
know.
is it well, and because it's a new skill set, right? How do you think
Right.
into briefing a robot that you yeah, I mean, it's weird. I'm fascinated to see what happens with it.
Yeah.
And I think the art that is generated by, or the art, I was going to say the art that's generated by AI, the art that is generated by people with AI is fascinating. I think,
Hmm.
we've obviously got some interesting conversations to have around copyright and what's art, what's not. But that's it's
Oh yeah.
different to any of the conversations that
There's
we've had
people
as we
already
evolve different art forms.
filing lawsuits. Yeah, there's
Yeah,
already lawsuits being
yeah,
filed about copyright infringement because I mean, it's basically, I mean,
totally.
it's skimming the internet for material that's already been written. So
Hmm.
eventually, if you're not checking the stuff that you're using, somebody might come along and sue you.
Yeah, that's it. That's it. I heard, though, that your friend was in New Hampshire, and I just had to call out that that's where my favourite fictional character comes from, President
Oh,
Bartlett.
really?
Yeah,
Okay. Okay. How about that? And they're
President Bartlett, the
speaking of
West Wing, the
weather,
best
they're
TV ever.
having they're having they're having beautiful weather up there right now. Let me
Are
tell you.
they?
Uh, oh yeah, yeah, yeah. It's a lot cooler up there. It gets cooler up there earlier than here. We don't really have a winter. It just
No, you don't, do you?
I think last yeah I think last year we had one day that actually had a hard freeze. That was it.
You're right. Yeah, so
I
we
kind
don't
of
get a
felt
freeze
like
at all.
I overdid it. I had to put all the plants off the porch into the greenhouse, for the winter. And I'm like, well, we didn't have any freezing weather.
Well, that's similar
It's
to
all
us.
good.
We don't in Brisbane. We don't get a freeze at all. On some of the outskirts, we can get a frost, but yeah, nothing like that.
uh, I was going to ask you something too. You had mentioned,
Yeah.
I had seen somewhere, I think it was on your LinkedIn page, where you had mentioned being an optimistic cynic. How do you balance, you know, yeah, 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 yeah. How do you balance sometimes the harsh realities, in leadership and business and maintaining an optimistic outlook?
It's such a rip of a question, and like the answer to that changes on a daily basis. Sometimes it's ice cream, sometimes it's martinis, and sometimes it's coffee. um, I used to call myself a Pollyanna. I don't think I'm that optimistic anymore. I probably don't believe that everything can be changed with with sparkling crystals and a happy attitude. But I do think that my approach to it can change. And I mean, yeah, working in the public service, you do become cynical. And any of the political satire TV shows that have ever been created, they're real for a reason and they hurt for a reason. There are some TV shows here in Australia that I
Sure.
can't watch because they're just too close to the bone, even though they're meant to be funny. But how I maintain my optimism is recognizing and believing in the never ending good of people. And at the end of the day, all of the stuff that bugs us about the world is created by people. And therefore, it can be uncreated by people, or we can create a different outcome. Is it going to happen tomorrow? No. Is there some really heavy, frustrating, annoying stuff going on in the world at the moment? Yeah, there really is. Has that always been the case? Probably to different degrees. And
Hmm.
somehow the human race continues to be okay. Again, one of the side effects of the digital world that we now live in is that we are exposed to all of it all of the time. And that, I think, is where some of that real
Yes.
heaviness comes in. And it does feel like it's worse than it's ever been. We're also, I often say, in a post abundant lifestyle where we've actually all got more time than we've ever had before and more bandwidth, more mental bandwidth. We have the time and the space to think into the stuff that doesn't actually directly affect us. So for me, I choose what I pay attention to. I choose what I kind of let just sit in my peripheral vision as distinct to what I actually go, oh no, I want to do something about that. And I make sure I look after myself. I practice my yoga and my meditation and my walks every morning, and I smile at the kookaburras that laugh in the morning at me, and I smile at the sunrises, and I do my best to stay optimistic.
It's funny you say that. You're taking your morning walk. I live on a good sized piece of property, and every morning when I do my morning coffee, I go out on the porch to talk to the cats. Got a lot of cats out here,
Yep.
and I walk barefoot in the grass out in my yard
Yeah.
almost every morning, and there is I talk about it all the time, and there is a healing power of grounding,
There
to
really
the earth
is.
with your bare feet.
Absolutely. Yeah, I do my yoga on my front
It does
lawn
take
every
care of you.
morning.
It,
Uh, yeah, absolutely.
there you go. Uh, Let me ask you another question about going back to communication. How do you see
Yeah.
the intersection? Now, we have a lot of problems with diversity and inclusion here in the States.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
How do you see the intersection
Same.
of diversity, inclusion, in effective communication as it plays a role in the success of whether it be businesses or politics, city governments? There's just really a divide in a lot of cities here in this country,
Yeah.
and particularly in the South.
Yeah. And same. And in fact, at time of recording, we're about to go to a referendum to include a voice to Parliament, which will be an acknowledgement of our traditional owners in our constitution. And it's divisive, sadly, because we still have a lot of racism in this country. For me, there's a whole lot of things I want to say on this. First of all, we have to acknowledge that it's complex. And
Mm-hmm.
I'll say it like this. I'm choosing my words very wisely. Righteous indignation and moral outrage is not an effective change strategy. One of the things that social media has done over the last 10 years is encouraged us to believe that everyone's voice is equal, everyone's opinion is equal, and all you need is an audience, and you can slap the table or you can bang the table and people will listen to you. What that's done is it's created ever louder, ever separated echo chambers of people yelling at each other about their own opinions, about their like
Mm-hmm.
opinions. I think that one of the strategies is in trying to inform change, in trying to change that societal and generational division, we have to get more people contributing in the current systems and in the current conversations. It's no good sitting on the outside of the system, throwing rocks at it, saying your system is wrong, and I'm just going to keep yelling at it. We have seen that that doesn't work. So that's one of the reasons why I'm big
Right.
on encouraging people from minority groups on how to effectively communicate in those current and existing systems. So rather than complaining about the system, get into the system, be part of the system, and be contributing to the conversations that are in the system, rather than yelling at the system from Twitter or from X or whatever we call it now, because that doesn't work. That doesn't
Yeah.
work. It doesn't change anything. And in fact, all it does is it perpetuates the differences rather than influence legitimate change.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. 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 And all of those things that you just said, and what talking about diversity and inclusion, wherever it may be, it would it would be imperative. A thinking person would think to yourself, now it's gonna really be important for me to get my point across effectively.
And part of getting your point across effectively is recognizing and understanding the audience that you're speaking to. So again, going back to that model that I was talking before about, understanding where my listener is at compared to where I want them to be, taking your listeners, taking your audience on a journey to where you want them to go is imperative. Just telling them that they should be there doesn't work. Anyone who's a parent
Right.
knows that just telling people doesn't work. And in fact, it gets worse as we get older. You're not going to tell me what to do. Who are you? You have to take people on a journey. You have to show them.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's been fascinating talking to you. I have one last question for you, Kat. What message or advice would you give to aspiring speakers or leaders, business leaders, that kind of thing, to make a lasting impact through their communication and leadership skills?
That's a ripper of a question to wrap up on, Tracy. Thank you. My piece of advice is get clear first about what you want to happen as a result of this communication. What is the influence? What is the impact that you are trying to make? Not what's the opinion you're trying to jam down someone's throat, but what's the impact? What's the end result here? And how do you move your listener one step closer? One step closer. Because influence is a thing that takes time. It takes an investment. And so to bring that up a couple of levels, you asked, what would be my one aspiring thing to say to leaders? Be clear on where you're taking your people, whoever your people are. What's the impact that you're striving to make right now in your life? And work consistently towards that in all of your communications. And be gentle on yourself. It actually isn't something that happens in one fell swoop. It's not something that happens in one conversation. I'm forever saying, how do we change the world? One conversation at a time. That's it. It's one conversation at a time.
And we've just changed the world just a little teeny bit with our little conversation today.
Exactly.
It's been my pleasure to have you on the podcast, Kat. We will definitely be talking more online. I know we will. And you're welcome to come on the show anytime. I know
Thank you.
You follow some of the stuff I do in the group and all that. And when I get ready to send this into post-production and I put up the blog post and everything, we'll have all your links involved and all the information that the listeners and viewers are going to need. I'll have all of that, the links that they're going to need and so forth. And even on the audio portion of it where there's, I think 2,000 words or something like that I can put in there. So they'll be able to find you.
Fabulous.
So for now, enjoy the weather that you're having in Australia. Enjoy the weather that you're having out there in Australia, and I'll do the same here in Florida.
Thank you, Tracy, and thank you for having me on the podcast.
Well, that's a wrap. Another fantastic episode of the podcast. You can find us on all the social media platforms, wherever you surf, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter X, Threads, wherever. Don't forget to like, share, and comment. And on our YouTube channel, don't forget to like, share, comment, and smash that subscribe button. If you're streaming audio for the podcast, you can find us wherever you get your favorite podcast programs. In the meantime, I like to tell everybody, take care of yourselves and each other. Until next time. Peace.